New moon. Initially, my script said, this movie should be easy to talk about because nothing happens for the first 20 minutes. But nothing happens for the first hour and 30 minutes of Twilight, and I managed to talk about that for 2 hours, so buckle in. The first 20 minutes is so boring. It's so, this is like, I watched Twilight and then I was like, you know what, I enjoyed Twilight, let's put on New Moon. And I put New Moon on because I expected to have as good of a time watching as I did Twilight. But I was so bored. Nothing is happening. And so I had to stop roughly 20 minutes into the film. But I wanted to watch it because I wanted to make these videos, just because I can do what I want. I'm an adult. So I got my friend to come and watch it with me, and we had some drinks, we had some sweets, and we just kind of watched it and ragged on it. And it was so much better watching with a friend. Also, she'd read the Twilight series when she was a teen, and I think she'd seen the movies before. So there were actually some points when I was like, and she'd be able to go, ah. So that was really helpful, and I'm really grateful to her for really increasing my enjoyment of the film and being someone to bounce ideas off, because I was able to be like, she was like, So the movie starts with Bella having like a dream sequence. She's running through a bunch of red capes, and then she runs out into a field, and it's, you know, it's the field that they lay down in and they spun. And she sees her grandma, and she's like, hi, grandma. And Edward's like, hey, it's me. And so she goes to introduce Edward to her grandma. But plot twist, it's actually a mirror.
Happy birthday, Bella.
Cause she's gonna get old. This is kind of an annoying running theme, actually. I get an email. This is kind of a really annoying running theme in the movie that's never really addressed with how unhealthy it is. It kind of seems to be like a character motivation, which is questionable, but Bella's obsessed with age. She is obsessed with getting older, obsessed with like being older than Edward, and so a lot of her motivation to be a vampire now as soon as possible is so that she doesn't get old, and she doesn't want to age, and, you know, grey hairs, wrinkles, all that jazz. She doesn't, like, she's so like paralyzed with fear of. And in, like, I guess in a normal coming of age story, you'd address that and you'd realize that like growing older is a part of the human experience. It's a part of life. It's how you grow and become a new person, and actually no one should want to stay as their 17, 18-year-old self, because hopefully no one is their perfect self when they're 18. We all grow from that experience and, you know, new knowledge. I mean, even if you become a terrible person, you're probably a better terrible person than you were when you were 18. The moral of my rant has gone away from me. Yeah, so with Bella's fixation on age being established pretty much early on, because Edward's like, happy birthday, and she's like, don't say that.
Well, your birth is definitely something to celebrate.
Yeah, my aging is not.
You're aging. I think 18 is a little young to start worrying about that.
It's 1 year older than you.
Alright, 1 year. It's not that big of a deal. Especially when he's 117. He's old. Like, she's not a year older than him. And he brings that up. He's like, you know, actually, I'm super old. And she goes, oh, I shouldn't be dating an older man. It's like so gross. And he's like, ha ha ha. And then they kiss. And we're supposed to be like, haha, jokes. But in my head, I'm like, yeah, no, like, I don't want people to misunderstand me. I enjoy vampire novels. I enjoy a good vampire romance. And, you know, if some like 100, 200, 300, 1,000-year-old vampire rocked on up and was all like, hey, I would consider it, okay? I would be swept off my feet by a charming vampire, and the age difference wouldn't matter because they'd be an adult and I'd be an adult. So it doesn't really make much of a difference. But I wouldn't be fixated on being older than them because, like, even if they didn't turn me until I was like 40, in fact, I'd prefer that. Like, don't turn me until I'm 40, 50. Maybe 50. 50's a good age. My mum's 50 and she still looks bomb, and she's also accomplished so much in her life, and she's like really centered as a person. So 50's a good age. I'd be turned into a vampire at 50. Yet again, my point has gotten away from me. All I'm saying is, yeah, it is a bit weird and creepy, but I think the vampires in this series stagnate at their age. They don't grow older, in a sense. That's why they've been, you know, happy to play happy families with Carlisle and Esme for 100 years. Because it's just like, well, we still feel like teenagers. We still feel like young kids. So, young kids, 17, 18, they can legally vote. This when Jasper showed up, I was like, Jasper, yeah, and he's doing his like thing again, and I love him. But then he breaks the illusion, and he smiles. Excuse you, you're supposed to be a spooky, scary man. What's this human emotion on your face?
It'll be fun.
Sorry, Bella.
I don't like that. I don't like that.
Oh, my love, my wife, death that hath sucked the honey of thy breath hath had no power yet upon thy beauty. Thou art not conquered. Beauty's ensign yet as crimson is thy lips and in thy cheeks. And death's pale flag is not advanced in
This scene bothers me, and because they're watching Romeo and Juliet, and they're watching this old ass version of it, and all of the kids are like enraptured, and one kid is crying, but the only believable thing is Bella and Edward at the back, like.
I do envy him one thing.
Juliet is like perfect. If you like that obviously beautiful sort of thing.
Girl, are you so insecure that you're jealous of a play character? Okay. No, Edward didn't mean, you know, he's jealous of Romeo because Juliet's just so gorgeous. No, he is jealous of Romeo because Romeo can kill himself, and it's just really hard for a vampire to kill himself. And he's like, yeah, I've thought about it a lot. And Bella goes, what? and he's like, well, you know, I didn't know if I was going to be able to save you last movie, so I had to come up with a contingency plan. Last movie, if he had not saved Bella, he was planning to kill himself. Oh my god, that's so unhealthy. At least Bella is like, don't say that. Don't talk about that. Like, but she gets like she's distraught. She's like, don't talk about that because I don't know what I'd do without you. And it feels more like if you died, I'd die. From both of them. Like, if you die, I die. That ain't right. You shouldn't. No.
I can't even think about someone hurting you.
Bella, the only thing that can hurt me is you.
Also, like, Edward's been alive this whole goddamn time, but Bella shows up for 5 minutes comparison, and he's like, you know what? Death's good, actually. And I bring up this criticism not because I don't understand fiction. I understand that not everything you write is necessarily an endorsement. I understand this is a fiction movie. However, fiction and the media we consume can impact how we respond to reality as well. It impacts what we think is okay and healthy. It's why so many people talk about representation in media and criticize those sort of aggressive, sexual, aggressive romances in movies and things like that. Stalking is romance, there are some really, really, really good video essays about these sorts of things. So I'm not going to go into it because I'm not capable. But all I can say is if someone says that to you, doesn't matter how much you love them or how much they love you, threatening to kill yourself if someone leaves you is a manipulation tactic. It is an abuse tactic. Even if the threat isn't if they lose you, it could be, if you don't do this, I'll kill myself. If you don't do what I want, or if I lost you, if it was, I don't know what I'd do without you, I'd probably die without you, my life has no meaning without you. It's a manipulation tactic, and they might not even be doing it on purpose. I don't want to necessarily demonize suicidal people. I've been there. But if you are in the situation where you say that, and I say this from experience, then you need to get help. And maybe the relationship you're in isn't healthy. I feel it's necessary to say, because I bring up these criticisms not because I don't understand that Twilight is just a fun romance thing, but because sometimes just even one more movie, one more piece of media contributing to this idea that this is an okay way for a relationship to turn out can end up getting you in a situation where you think, oh, this is fine. I hope that makes sense. I hope that's not too much of a Debbie Downer. It is. In summary, it's not, despite what the movie tells you, it's not a romantic line. It is a red flag with a megaphone. Alice throws Bella a birthday party, and it's very awkward. It's so awkward.
Show me the love.
The Cullens and Bella, and Bella's all like, I don't. She genuinely is not having a good time. She doesn't like attention being on her, so she's just like, and she gets like given presents, and everyone's like, present. And she goes, thank. Somehow, everyone's having a mediocre time, which is probably a great time in Forks, and then Bella somehow manages to like give herself a real serious cut on her finger, like with a lot of blood, and she goes, paper cut. How deep are you cutting? Where have you cut on your finger that much blood is coming out? What sort of fabric is that paper made of? Fabric, material, industrial grade wrapping paper. So it's a little bit of blood, and it's like, oopsie doodle, but you're in a family of vampires. Most everyone is okay, but Jasper freaks out, and he's all like, and like runs at her, and Edward, in his infinite wisdom to protect Bella, just fucking slams her against the wall.
Jazz, shh, it's okay. It's just a little blood.
Straight into a bunch of glass, and she ends up with this huge cut on her arm, loads of blood. Most of the rest of the Cullens have to excuse themselves. Even Edward looks like he's 50-50 on whether or not to bite Bella.
Carla, you couldn't be damned. You couldn't. It's impossible. So that's it. That's why he won't change me?
Look at Bella's face while Carlisle is cleaning her up and she's talking about like wanting to be changed and stuff. She would not care less if it was Edward who changed her or someone else. She's just straight up wants to be a vampire. She pushes it a lot.
Change me. Change me. Change me.
I feel like her obsession with being a vampire goes beyond wanting to be with Edward, which I suppose is good. She has her own wants and desires outside of the relationship, which is healthy. However, I think it would be funnier if Twilight was told from the perspective of Bella wanting to be a vampire, and then Edward happens to come along and fall in love with her, and she's like, cha-ching. She's just using Edward this whole time because she just really wants to be a vampire, and I just think that's funny. I think it adds a layer of depth and more believability because she pushes it so much and she's so obsessed with it, and it needs to be now, like it needs to be as soon as possible, which makes absolutely no sense. Can't remember if I mentioned it in the first video, but I still get mistaken for a high schooler. You know, if I got my backpack on, I've got no makeup on, and I'm standing at a bus stop, usually with a bunch of other teenagers, I go on and I ask for a student because I am studying, then they'll be like, oh, you going to the high school? You how's your final year? Like, I'm like, no. I'm an adult. I have reached a quarter of a century years old. But I understand from my youthful glow and pimples that you would think I was a teenager. So, with the Cullens continuing to like go to high school and graduate, and they could probably do a few years of university and then like just drop out.
Just give me 5 years.
That's too long.
And 3.
It would still work if Bella waited until she was 21, 22, 25. Heck, if she looks young enough, she could wait until 27. She'd be pushing it, but, you know, some high schoolers just look really old. Bella is not convinced of this. Bella obviously once you hit sort of 19, 20, that's it. It's all downhill from there. Grey hairs on the dot. 21st birthday, you drink, you get grey hairs. That's it.
How'd you get so old so fast?
I didn't. It's not that old.
I don't know. Is that a gray hair?
No. No way.
Bella's trying to like sell her case to Edward. She goes, you know, one, I'm gonna die anyway, you know, like eventually. But also I could die horribly in an accident. So have you considered that, sir? 2, you won't think I'm hot when I'm old. So check and mate, Edward. Turn me into a vampire. And Edward goes, you think my love for you is that shallow? Alright, maybe he's into that, but that's still only like 80 years tops. She does have a good point. I still think she could wait a couple of years, but she has a good point. Eventually there's an expiration date on this relationship, and he has already expressed, like, he kind of showed his hand. He's like, you know, once you're gone, I'm gone too. So Bella would steadily grow old, knowing that the love of her life would take his own life once she's in the grave, you know, like a Egyptian pharaoh, you know, she gets buried with him. And yeah, I'd be concerned about that too if I was desperately in love with a guy I'd known for a few months. It's never happened, but, you know, I can relate.
How you feel about your soul? I don't believe that. So don't worry about mine.
Edward's big thing is the soul, you know? He believes his whose mortal soul is damned because he is a vampire. He doesn't want to do that to Bella. And Bella's like, well, I don't believe in souls, so... Which totally, totally dismisses his belief and belief system and something like really, really important to him and stuff like that. So it's I understand she's like, no, it's okay, come on, bite me, bite me, bite me. But it's dismissive. Like, just because you don't believe in souls, if your significant other does believe in souls, don't be a dick about it. While she's at school the next day, Edward breaks into her home and goes through her stuff and messes around with some of it. Again, not romantic, creepy. And when she comes home, he's just hanging on her lawn in a suit. Okay. And he takes her into the woods. Not their magic field of spinning, but just the woods outside her house. And is like, it's time for us to break up.
You just don't belong in my world, Bella.
Bella is deliberately misinterpreting what he says. He says, I don't want you to come. And he has explained that this is because it is dangerous for her to be around them. And he is trying to protect her by not being around her anymore.
I don't want you to come.
You don't want me.
No.
I would interpret that as, you don't want me to come. And then he goes, what does he say? He says something like, I'm not good for you, or you're not good for me, or something like that.
You're just not good for me.
I'm not good enough for you.
This was really frustrating for me to watch, because I'm like, that's not what he said. And my friend had to be like, yes, but that's how she's interpreting the situation. And me, I'm just like, well, that's dumb. She shouldn't think that. And she shouldn't. Listen to what people say. They're words. And don't put words in their mouth. He has said, being around me, a blood-sucking vampire, is dangerous for you, person with delicious smelling blood. So we're going away so that my family doesn't murder you. And she goes, oh, so I'm not good enough for you? Is that it? Well, I understand. Okay. Considering how Bella freaked out last movie at the mere suggestion of not being in Forks anymore, she takes this breakup relatively well. You know, she's just kind of like, Edward, Edward, Edward. And she stumbles around in the forest for hours, and then she just lies down for a little dirt nap. Just dirt nap. She gets carried out of the forest by Sam.
Thank you, Sam.
Maybe I should go outside for a dirt nap. I might also mention that if your reaction to getting broken up with leads you to disregard your personal safety and lie down in the dirt in a forest at night, you probably weren't in a very healthy relationship. Extreme reactions to these things are indicators of dysfunction. Just saying. Following the breakup, Bella sinks into a deep depression. And I must complain. Now, I'm not going to complain that falling into depression after being broken up with is ridiculous, because it's actually not. Being sad after a meaningful relationship has ended is a normal thing. being sad for months, probably pushing it. Depending on how it broke up. If you were broken up with relatively normally, say your partner said, hey, being together is unsafe for both of us, so we're going to break up now. In a forest, perhaps. There's no expiry date on sadness, I guess, or grief. But you probably shouldn't be not doing anything, not interacting with people, like full on deep clinical depression for months after that, particularly if it was, say, random, non-specific example, just a high school relationship that lasted less than a year. No one is worth that much emotional time. I'm complaining because apparently in the book, these were just blank chapters with the month date on them. And I think that's actually a really, really good way to represent depression, because sometimes it does just feel like that. Time just goes by and you feel like nothing happened. That's good. I really like that. What the movie does visually is it has her sitting in the chair and it spins around her, the camera spins around her, and we see out the window. Each time we go past the window, the seasons have obviously changed. That's also a really great representation of the time passing. I think it takes the idea of the book without, making a literal translation to it. It makes the jump from text to film. But then they ruin it for putting the words over top. Do you think your audience doesn't know how seasons work? I just think it ruins. It tries to literally translate what the book did, which is not smart. And the book handled it really well. The movie had a really good visual, and then the movie ruined it. On top of being, depressed for months, Bella wakes up every single night, I think, with night terrors where she's screaming in agony and like gripping at her chest because it just feels like there's a hole in her chest. And every night Charlie wakes up and he runs over and comforts her. Good Dad Award, yay for Charlie. Months later, like she's still doing it months later, even after she's like on her like recovery. That ain't right. That ain't healthy. And like good Dad Award for Charlie, but it takes him 3 months to be like, okay, that's enough. All right. You need to go outside and talk to other human people because this is not healthy behavior. Probably a month or so earlier, I probably would have referred her to counseling. Almost immediately, if she was that severely depressed, I'd refer her to counseling. Do they not have school counselors in Forks? Please, if this happens to you or someone you know, counseling is really good. There are apps you can get who can do like free online counseling, because I know that getting proper, expensive counseling is expensive, it costs money, and sometimes you don't have that money. I feel like maybe Charlie does, or at least Bella's mum, who's married to a famous baseball player, would have the money to afford proper psychiatric care or counseling care for her child. So, at this threat from Dad of being sent home to her mum, and Bella still not wanting to leave Forks because what if Edward comes back and is like, I love you again? Don't worry about us being a human and a vampire. I suddenly changed all my opinions. She's like, no, I'm gonna go have a girls' night out with my friend Jessica, who I think we're supposed to infer that she is not spoken to really for 3 months. So cut to the next scene, and they've just come out of a movie, and Jessica makes some really cool points about zombie films.
It's supposed to like draw a parallel about leprosy. My cousin had leprosy. It's not funny, you know? And like, it's supposed to be a metaphor for consumerism, because don't be so pleased with your own like self-referential cleverness, you know?
I like her. I think we're not supposed to like Jessica. I think she's supposed to be a typical like self-absorbed teenage girl, but I think her friend withdrew from her, hasn't spoken to her, calls her up at the drop of a hat to be like, hey, let's go for a movie, and she hangs out, and she brings up that she was concerned about her, and when Bella goes, oh, is that a ghost, Edward, I see, and runs off, she waits for her.
Keep walking.
Oh yeah, did I mention ghost, Edward? The concept that perhaps worked better when you couldn't physically see it. But Bella she's just looking at these guys on motorbikes. She's just looking at this guy being like, hey, girls. And then Spirit Edward goes, don't do it. And she's like, ghost Edward, huh? So she runs on over and she freaks out this motorbike guy, and you've got to be pretty weird to freak out a guy who just sits on a motorbike harassing teenage girls. And she gets on the back of the bike, and Edward's still like, and they go on the bike, and then she goes, stop, and this possible, like, this built up to be like a bad guy is like, okay, I'll stop when you ask. He seems like a nice guy. Doesn't murder her, doesn't kidnap her, and stops when she asks. And also doesn't, insult her for apparently talking to no one, He just likes to give random strangers rides on his motorbike. Don't judge the man. So Bella's like, Ghost Edward, motorbikes, Ghost Edward, and goes to Jacob. So this is where the movie picks up. The movie picks up because Jacob's on the scene, and Jacob is nice, and he's a lot more fun than Edward because he has facial expressions. And I think Robert Pattinson was mostly checked out for the movies. I think he tried last movie. He certainly does not seem to be trying this movie. I think he brings it back up next movie, but he's mostly like, you get that feeling from like interviews and stuff. He was really quite judgmental of Twilight, which is not fair. I think he should have been able to analyze things a little bit better because he was like 22. But even then, like, everyone got caught up in the anti-Twilight phase, so no hard feelings, Robert. But his performance is so dull. And Taylor Lautner's actually thinking, acting is good. Emotions are good. So Jacob is just, a breath of fresh air. Him and Bella have a much more fun dynamic. They bounce off each other a lot better. Maybe that's just Taylor Lautner and Kristen Stewart having better acting chemistry. I don't know. And also, I guess the color palette feels warmer when it's around Jacob as well. A lot of warm tones and like nice natural green tones from being outside and stuff like that. It's good. Anyway, so she rocks on up and she's like, hey, Jacob, I want to hang out with you, my friend, with no ulterior motives, to ride a motorbike. And then she goes, oh, do you think it's really dangerous? Are you going to like try and like paternalistically tell me what I can and can't do? And Jacob goes, no, you make your own decisions and I support you. And already we feel that maybe Jacob is a better suit for Bella because he actually supports her. But despite how nice Jacob is and how safe he makes her feel and how the movie, everything about like the movie, from the cuts and the warmth and the visuals telling us that he's like safe and better to be around than Edward, she's still waking up with nightmares. Good God, get her some counseling. This is not healthy. They fix the bikes and Bella, like, they drive out to go and test them out, and Jacob goes, well, if I'd said I couldn't have fixed those bikes, what would you have done? You know, kind of implying you wouldn't have wanted to hang out with me if we weren't fixing the bikes. And Bella goes, hey, if you'd said you couldn't have fixed those bikes, I would have found something else for us to do. That's a lie. That's straight up a lie. We know she went to go and get those bikes fixed specifically to see Edward. So maybe now she'd willingly hang out with Jacob for, you know, health reasons and because he's her friend and he deserves her time. But not then. No, it was only motivated by Edward. If he'd said that, she would have been like, all right, bye, and then found something else to do. So it's not heartwarming. I'm just like, liar! Lies!
Stop.
She just sits on the motorbike and Ghost Edward shows up and is like, stop it.
Stop.
Stop it. Get some help.
She's just gonna go down the road, Edward. Calm down. I think this frustrates me because this could have been a story about healthy recovery. And it could have been like a really relatable story about how sometimes we get into these ruts, these mental health ruts, and sometimes they're caused by things, and unhealthy relationships can throw us into depression. But these healthy coping mechanisms, you know, continuing to hang out with friends, finding hobbies to do, making something, making stuff is so good for your mental health. And it could have been a story about recovery and support and love and being really good, but instead she gets on the bike and immediately relapses. She sees Ghost Edward and is like, oh, Edward, and then she cracks her head open. Hit the brake! So the teenage boy, he returns. He's like, hey, you want to go to a movie? And Bella says, yeah, let's go to a movie. And he goes, you want to go to romantic movie? And she goes, no, action movie. All friends come too. And he goes, oh, because he was asking her out on a date. But he wasn't doing it in an explicit way. And sometimes you just gotta be straightforward, man. Like, I too probably would have bellaed in that situation. I too would have been like, love spelled backwards is love? That doesn't even make sense. Let's go to Face Punch. Oh, the names of this movie is so self-aware. I would love to go see both Face Punch and Love Spelled Backwards is Love. But then they show up and she shows up and we see that all the friends can't make it for whatever reason. And I was like, inconvenient, but convenient for a teenage boy, except Bella also invited Jacob because friends. And it took me until my third viewing to go, oh, teenage boy ask friends to not come so he can date. Oh, I didn't realize. It's the autism. I didn't get it. I also didn't get that they were waiting for her to, both of them were waiting for her to hold their hands. I also was just like, they're both sitting funny. So, poor teenage boy, he throws up at the sight of blood. And that's funny because Bella's in love with someone who drinks blood. And Jacob's all like, oh, what a baby. No, he calls him a marshmallow. What a cute insult. And then there's some hand holding, and he goes, "What? I can't hold your hand?" She says, "Yes, but I think it means something different to you." Okay. She gives Jacob a whole bunch of mixed signals. She's all like, "Don't hold my hand," but also "Do hold my hand," but don't tell me you love me, but also don't give up on me. And Jacob's all like, "I know what Edward did, and I know he hurt you. I'd never do that." What did Edward do? Break up with her in a forest? Like, where are you gonna break up with her? In a mall? Edward didn't do anything wrong in that instance. Edward has done many things wrong. I'm not Team Edward. I'm not Team Edward. But the way the movie frames the breakup is like Edward did some sort of terrible thing, and I guess from Bella's perspective, he was like, "I'm not interested in you," which is not the end of the world. If someone's like, I mean, someone saying you're not good enough for me is rude. That's not nice, but it's not the cruelest thing someone could do to you. So, and then Jake goes through wolf puberty.